The room fell silent when the arrogant billionaire leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said coldly, "I want a baby." Everyone in the meeting thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't asking. She was demanding. And when the quiet single father sitting across the table finally spoke, his answer didn't just surprise her. It stopped her heart cold. Because in that single moment, the most powerful woman in the city realized something she had never understood in her entire life. That money could buy almost everything. Except the one thing she was asking for. And the truth behind his words would change both of their lives forever. The rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows of the 25th floor office. Inside, everything looked perfect: expensive furniture, polished marble floors, and a massive desk where Victoria Hale sat like a queen ruling her kingdom. At only 35, Victoria had built a billion-dollar tech empire. People admired her success, feared her temper, and obeyed her orders without question. She had everything. Luxury homes. Private jets. Power. But there was one thing she didn't have. And that fact had been bothering her for months. Across from her sat Daniel Carter, a quiet man in his early 30s. He worked as a logistics manager for Victoria's company, dependable, hardworking, and almost invisible in the massive corporation. Most executives didn't even know his name. But Victoria knew. Not because of his position. Because of his reputation. People said Daniel was different. Honest. Calm. A man who never lost his temper and never chased promotions. But what truly caught Victoria's attention was something else. Daniel was raising a little girl alone. His wife had died 3 years earlier, leaving him with a newborn daughter named Lily. And somehow, despite working long hours and facing life alone, Daniel had become known in the company as the most devoted father anyone had ever seen. Employees often saw him leaving exactly at 5, rushing to pick Lily up from daycare. Sometimes he brought her to the office when childcare failed. A tiny girl with big brown eyes and messy curls. Even the toughest employees softened when she smiled. Victoria had watched this quietly. Studying. Calculating. Because while Daniel struggled to raise a child, Victoria had discovered something painful. She might never have one. Doctors had given her the news months earlier. Years of stress, endless work, and postponed personal life had taken their toll. Her chances of having a baby were almost gone. And for the first time in her life, Victoria Hale couldn't simply buy a solution. But she tried anyway. That morning, she had called Daniel into her office with a strange request. He sat calmly now, unaware that his life was about to collide with hers in the most unexpected way. Victoria leaned back in her chair. "I've been reviewing employee records," she said casually. Daniel nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am." She tapped a finger on the desk. "You're a single father." "Yes." "You raise your daughter alone." "Yes." Victoria stared directly into his eyes. Then she said the words that stunned him. "I want a baby." Daniel blinked slowly. For a moment he thought he had misheard her. But Victoria continued calmly. "I'm a practical woman, Mr. Carter. I don't believe in wasting time. You're intelligent, healthy, and clearly capable of raising a child." The room suddenly felt smaller. Daniel remained silent. Victoria folded her hands. "I'm offering you a deal." Now Daniel understood. And what he heard next shocked him even more. "I will pay you $5 million, she said, her voice perfectly steady. "You will help me have a child. Once the baby is born, you walk away. No responsibility. No involvement." She paused. "Your daughter will have a future secured forever." $5 million. For a man earning a modest salary, it was unimaginable money. Enough to give Lily the best schools, the safest home, every opportunity in the world. Most people would have accepted immediately. Victoria expected him to. But Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at the small photo frame on her desk. It was empty. No family pictures. No memories. Just polished glass. Finally, he spoke quietly. "May I ask you something, Ms. Hale?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." Daniel's voice remained calm. "Why me?" She answered honestly. "Because I've watched you." He looked surprised. "You love your daughter," she continued. "More than anything. That tells me the child would have good genetics." Daniel slowly looked up. Genetics. That was how she saw it. Like a business transaction. Victoria leaned forward. "So, what do you say?" She expected hesitation. Maybe negotiation. But Daniel did something she never expected. He shook his head. "No." The word landed like a stone in the quiet office. Victoria blinked. "Excuse me?" Daniel met her gaze calmly. "I can't do that." For the first time in years, someone had refused her. Victoria's voice sharpened. $5 million. For a single father working overtime just to survive. Daniel didn't move. "That money could change your daughter's life." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right." Victoria leaned back again, confident the conversation was turning. But then Daniel said something that made the entire room feel different. "And that's exactly why I can't accept it." Victoria frowned. "I don't understand." Daniel took a deep breath. "My daughter already has everything she needs." Victoria laughed softly. "You're joking." He shook his head. "No." Outside, the rain grew heavier against the windows. Daniel's voice remained steady. "Lily doesn't need millions of dollars." Victoria crossed her arms. "So what does she need?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "Love." Victoria rolled her eyes. "That's sentimental nonsense." Daniel looked at her with quiet patience. "No. It's the only thing that matters." She stared at him. "You think love pays for schools? Healthcare? Safety?" Daniel smiled gently. "No. But it builds something far stronger." Victoria felt irritation rising. "This is a business offer, Mr. Carter. Not a philosophy class." Daniel nodded politely. "Then let me give you a business answer." She waited. And what he said next was something Victoria Hale would never forget. "You don't want a baby," he said softly. "You want a product." The words hit harder than any insult. Victoria's face hardened. "That's ridiculous." Daniel continued calmly. "A child isn't something you order and receive." Victoria stood up. "You're out of line." But Daniel didn't stop. "Do you know why my daughter smiles every morning?" Victoria didn't answer. "Because when she wakes up scared in the middle of the night," he continued quietly, "someone is there." His voice softened. "Not a nanny. Not an assistant. A father." Victoria felt something unfamiliar tightening in her chest. Daniel looked around the giant empty office. "You can buy a baby, Ms. Hale." He paused. "But you can't by being a parent." Silence filled the room. Victoria felt angry. Defensive. And strangely, exposed. But Daniel wasn't finished. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a small photo. A little girl covered in paint, laughing wildly while holding a crooked drawing. Daniel placed the photo on her desk. "This is Lily," he said. Victoria glanced at it. The child looked joyful. Messy. Alive. Last week she painted this for me. Victoria said nothing. Daniel smiled. She said it's a picture of our house. Victoria looked closer. The drawing was terrible. Crooked walls. Purple grass. Yellow sky. But in the center were two stick figures holding hands. Daniel and Lily. That picture is worth more than $5 million to me. Victoria suddenly felt very quiet. Daniel stood up. I'm sorry, Miss Hale. He pushed the photo slightly toward her. But if you truly want a baby. He paused at the door. Then he said the sentence that stopped her cold. You need to learn how to love someone before they're born, not after you buy them. And with that, he walked out. Victoria remained standing in the silent office. For the first time in years. The most powerful woman in the city had no answer. But what she would discover the next day would challenge everything she believed about success, power, and what it truly meant to be a parent.